Mid North Coast, brilliant. Because you are our first Australian coming live from Australia.
So this is good, a proper Australian. So when we get on the world tour, we can put Australia in there as well.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be great. Okay.
Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Ladd, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast. This is episode 211. And if you are listening on the day of release, which I know many of you do, it is the 13th of September 2024. And this coming weekend, well, actually this afternoon, Pete and I will be at Brunel University with Magnus for Magnuson and Matt Diamond and Gary Clark, and we will be getting ready for Britain's Disabled Strongman over the weekend. Sorry, Pete, you want to say something?
And hopefully Stevie Shanks as well.
Stevie Shanks as well.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Stevie
I've just been
Shanks.
watching him on YouTube.
Yeah, well, I watched Stoneland actually a couple of days ago, and he was on there, wasn't he? So no, that was brilliant. So yeah, so we are joined by a guest today, who I will just tease and say it is our first ever Australian guest coming live from Australia. And we are recording this at 1 p.m. It's 10 p.m. for him. And if you're watching on YouTube, he is in the dark. He is nighttime, and he's been awake since 5 a.m. and it's 10 p.m. now. So we're going to get cracking in a second. But first of all, we've had a couple of reviews come in, and we always ask for reviews on Apple Podcasts. And I'm going to read you one now, which is from, let me just see, from Kane Folks Miller. And he said, I can't see the whole title there because it says, great advice, feel like you are. And then I can't see the rest of the title, but I can read the review. It says, love the style of this podcast. Makes you feel like you are sitting with James and Pete and having a good chat. Great range of topics and always amazed by the quality and diversity of the guests. Good listening, super knowledgeable team, thoroughly recommended. So thank you very much, Kane. If you can message me or message us and let us know your t-shirt size, what color you'd like, and then we will get that, and also your obviously home delivery address, and we'll get that shipped out to you ASAP. So thank you very much, Kane. And we have got another review as well that we'll be reading next time we come on, which will be great. But as I mentioned, we are joined from Australia, the mid-north coast of Australia, New South Wales, by Mr. Allen Willis. How are you doing, Alan? You okay?
I'm very well, thanks.
Excellent. So Alan is joining us now. Alan is, I don't exactly know how we first got in touch. I think Alan maybe Paul, was it via Paul McElroy, Alan? Is that right?
Yeah, so he shared one of your posts about the success you're having with the training that you're doing, and yeah, it's I love connecting with people that are doing great things, and you're definitely doing that. So
excellent. And then we just kind of started following each other. Pete follows you as well. We're all kind of connected on social media. And then, and I've been watching you, do your strongman training recently out in Australia. And then there was a post you put up the other day, actually, which kind of, it was a kind of almost a before and after, but a different kind of before and after. It was like moving from severely limited physically due to chronic pain, injury, that kind of thing, and how you sort of have rebuilt and are rebuilding yourself and bringing yourself back to training at a high level and competing at a high level in strongman out in Australia. So yeah, we just want to have a chat really and get to know you, and this is what's amazing about this podcast that we've been doing for the last 4 years. We just kind of can get connected to people all over the world, and now we're talking to you in Australia. It's, it's 10 p.m. for you, and we're talking and connecting and learning and being inspired and finding out more about people from all over the world. So I suppose, Alan, to begin with, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, about your life, about your kind of setup over in Australia, what you do kind of work-wise, but also maybe, what life's been like for you in terms of through you're 39 years old now, I think, but what was growing up like, sport, exercise, training, how you came to be in chronic pain. I mean, there's a huge amount we can cover, but you just sort of start where you want to start, and then we can kind of have a chat along the way, if that's okay.
Yeah, not a problem. Well, it's been an interesting life. So I guess I had a little bit of childhood trauma when I was a kid around my parents splitting up and having a father there one day and then not having him there the next. And I was diagnosed as ADD, ODD. I essentially fell through the cracks of just about every system at that young age. Um, Ended up being kicked out of every high school and banned from every school in New South Wales and ACT in Australia. And yeah, I ended up getting involved in drugs and alcohol and the clubbing scene and lived a fairly antisocial life until I was about 28 years old.
Hmm. So what caused you to be banned from the schools? Were you getting in trouble at school? Were you disruptive at school? Was it like fights and things like that, or just that you weren't able to kind of be attentive and sort of fit into the mold, I suppose, that they were trying to get you to be in? What was the picture like there?
There's definitely a little bit of that. I was my behavior wasn't the best. I was fighting. I was doing things like filling up Coke bottles with deodorant and lighting it and throwing it in the classroom and flames going everywhere. Like it was a lot of fun, but also just stupid.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Okay.
so they didn't like that among other things. And yeah, the schooling system wasn't necessarily for me, or I was in the wrong school, really, and had the wrong mentors. I didn't really have any mentors. I didn't have anyone to look up to except the bad kids, and then I wanted to be a part of that clique, and that just led me down some not so good paths.
Okay, so up until kind of your probably teens and your 20s, like you say, you're involved in alcohol, drugs, not antisocial, I suppose antisocial, but kind of like you say, separating yourself from society, I suppose, in a way. So were you
Yeah.
were you ever involved in any kind of sport or activity when you were growing up, or you were your role models were these kind of people that were leading you down that kind of other path, I suppose?
Well, I remember mum bought me a boxing bag and a bench press to help get rid of some of the stored anger and stuff that I had. And I remember using that for a little bit, but not really having a father, not really having any sort of real masculine role model in my life. I wasn't directed into any of that. I
Mm.
had a role model that an old Italian guy that lived across the road, and he was stepping up as a role model, and he ended up getting me my first ounce of weed and directing me in how to sell that. So it was kind of the complete opposite role models of what I needed at that time.
Yeah.
So
This is interesting because we've not actually. I can't think we've had a conversation with someone who's been so open and honest about, or their life has started in this way. So what you said up until you were 28, you kind of more, I mean, were you, uh, did you have addiction problems with alcohol and drugs in your 20s? Were you addicted to these substances and things in your 20s?
well, I think a lot of it stems from being on dexamphetamine at the age of 7. So I was on amphetamines for my ADD, and I think it was some of the beliefs that I developed around that time, like you're a bad kid, you need medication to be normal. Like there's a number of other beliefs there that I took on during that time. So later on in life, when life was getting bad or I felt like I was a bad person, those drugs, whether it was legally from the doctor or from the street, kind of made me feel good, kind of helped me concentrate. It made me feel like I was a better person.
Mm.
So when that's obviously okay for a little or a short amount of time, but when you keep doing those things over and over again, some of the antisocial stuff kind of turns your life to shit. And then you
Yeah.
rely off drugs and alcohol to help deal with the trauma that you're creating and the hardships that you're creating. So
Mm.
I was kind of stuck in some bad cycles. I've been to 4 different rehabs, and for the first few, it was more about like, how can I meet someone that sells better drugs, or is a meth cook, or like, yeah, it was just I didn't really want to get, I didn't really want to get clean at that stage. I wanted a better life, and that was the same mindset. I'll just find someone doing better than me, and they can teach me how to do better. When I wasn't actually thinking about like coaching or fitness or any sort of like healthy role model. It was always around feel goods and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what was your kind of, just so I get a picture, because so in Australia, where you were brought up in your kind of community, was it were you in a kind of an urban space? Were you kind of like in a suburb? Were you more like in a rural kind of environment? What was your community like around you at that stage?
So I grew up in Canberra, um, and there's not much to do there. As well, there's probably plenty of things to do there, but not when you've got any social mates that like to drink and take drugs. So I ended up going, at one stage, I was going out to the clubs like 4 or 5 nights a week,
Mm,
taking pills, selling pills,
mm.
just yeah,
Okay.
living a life that wasn't of any real benefit to my life.
Mm. And what changed? You know, what happened? What what changed, or what was the spark to change? I mean, you mentioned up until about 28, this was kind of the path of your life. And it sounds like you were on, not a particularly great path. Like you said, not doing anything that was really particularly good to you or probably particularly good for others. So what caused you to change at that kind of late 20s ish sort of time?
I guess I so my mum died and my ex left me with 2 kids, and the trauma of that, I couldn't handle it, and I didn't have any real mates. I went to my old mates and they passed me an ice pipe, so methamphetamines, and it took all the pain away. I was able to be strong for my family, be strong for myself, be strong for those around me. And it obviously that only lasted a couple of weeks until some of the negative side effects of where do I get more money, everything else to buy more drugs, that kind of kicked in, and I ended up trying to climb a ladder of a street crew that um, wasn't healthy at all, to the point where um, you basically, I don't know how to explain that on the podcast. Things happened if you reached a certain level, and I found out about it, and I didn't want nothing to do with it. And I ended up getting chased for like 20 Maoris and got myself out of town, booked myself into a psych ward. I tried to hang myself in the car. Like I knew that like I just couldn't keep doing what I was doing. So I tried to hang myself. My phone rang. It was a private number. I decided to pull the noose off my neck, and I booked myself into hospital that night. And that was my step back going to rehab for the third time, and that process happened. But when I got kicked out of my fourth rehab, um, which kind of feeds into where I started hanging around with the meth cook and got in trouble with that as well. But I was at a homeless shelter in Sydney, and I'm running around. I'm seeing all these young kids come in. I'm like, I don't want you to be a junkie like I am. Like I was basically just a junkie at that stage, and I seen myself in them, and I didn't want them to end up like I was. So I was trying to stop them, and I woke up one day. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Excuse the language. I'm like,
Mm,
well, I'm not listening to my own words. I'm trying to help all these people, but I'm not actioning any of this for myself. And that day, I booked myself into a rehab on the mid north coast of Australia, and I came up here, and I spent 2.5 years in that rehab. I volunteered for that rehab, and I made sure that I changed my life so that I didn't have to go back again. I wasn't going to be that person that escaped reality using drugs, that couldn't handle my own life. I decided to take control of my life and do something about it.
Mm. Wow. And did you say you had 2 children at this stage as well?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had a bit of a toxic relationship, and it wasn't very healthy at all, and it kind of imploded,
Mm.
exploded, imploded. It fell apart, not
Yeah.
very nicely.
Okay. So I mean, Pete, have you got any questions? I mean,
I was going to say it's really interesting what Alan's just said there about when he was in rehab and there's all these kids in there and stuff. And no, you were in the shelter, you said, and there's all these kids in there, and you're giving them advice that you weren't heeding yourself, and that's very common, not just in that world, in every world, isn't it? Like people dish out advice all over the place, and it's like, yeah, but look at yourself. And if if you're dishing it out, you've got to kind of live up to it yourself, haven't you? So, the way we do stuff on this podcast and the guests that we get on and some of the stories that we've heard are people who've been through, not necessarily to that extent, but similar sorts of things where they're like, well, finally, I made it's that decision, isn't it? At the time of like, right, I mean it now. And it's a long process, especially when there's drugs involved, because obviously that clouds your judgment, doesn't it? So yeah. that's amazing. That's an amazing beginning. That's not even the full story.
Yeah. So Alan,
Yeah,
I was just going to say, so when you had this 2.5 year sort of spell in rehab, if you like, where you then became, you started working there and all the rest of it, and you were there for 2.5 years. So when you came out of that, I mean, how many years ago would that have been when you kind of left that 2.5 year period?
So I'm basically 11 years clean from any substance abuse. Like I'll have the odd drink every now and again, haven't had any issues. But I don't take any drugs. I don't feel the need to. Like I might do something from a spiritual or like a trauma healing standpoint, but it's more medical based. We'll say that because it's not technically legal. But that's not something that happens very often and is always for a specific reason.
So you've been clean now for 11 years, yeah?
Yeah.
How did you start to rebuild your life? Because it sounds to me like from a young age, like you said, maybe 7, 8 years old, and then all through school and all through your 20s, you weren't really. It sounds like you weren't really engaged in society in a normal kind of way, in a kind of a normal kind of healthy way, without having this addiction and different behaviors going on. So sort of when you decided to, when you actually have been clean for 11 years, how did you start to rebuild your life? Well, because it sounds like probably you've not ever really had a reference point of and again, you don't want to use the word normal because nothing's normal, but more conventional or how did you start to rebuild from that point of view?
Well, so when mum died, I was left with an inheritance, and I wasted a decent chunk of money while I was in addiction still. And I made a vow that I was going to spend more money on personal development than I did on drugs itself. While I was at rehab, at one stage, I was on a tractor slashing lawns. And this is where I got into like self-mastery and some personal development through Bob Proctor and a number of other guys. Like I started listening to what they had to say. I started sitting with the emotions. Like even when I wasn't listening to something, one lap I'd be happy, the next lap I'd be sad, the next lap I'd be angry, and just analyzing that. So with each lap, I would reach this new point of understanding of why my life was the way it was. And with a lot of those gurus that I was listening to, I'm like, well, how do I do what you're doing? How do I understand and change my life like the stories you share? And that's when I found NLP coaching, so neuro-linguistic programming. And I talked the rehab into letting me study neuro-linguistic programming while I was still in rehab. And I started studying to be a life coach. And that's kind of what separated me. Like I knew AA and NA have a low success rate, and there seems to be a revolving door with rehabs, and I'd been through that process. So I knew I had to do something different, and that's what I did different. I invested in my own personal development, and that shifted everything.
And
that's interesting, because I was just thinking as you were talking earlier, like NA and AA and all of that is, the success rate is actually quite low. And what you've just said is, you can still have a drink every now and then. You can still, you still do what you do for medicinal purposes. And I've spoken to a few people about this who've had addictions in the past, and it's it's kind of like you can give up the thing, but then it needs to be replaced with something else. And giving up the thing, it doesn't make you stop craving it. You know what I mean? It's managing in my head, it's managing the craving, and it's becoming comfortable and okay with it. So you can still go and have a couple of beers, but not take it to the extreme like it might have used to have done. And you're actually in control of that. And I'd say that is a much bigger win than just giving up. Because there can be a relapse like 10, 12, 15 years down the line. But if you can go and have 2 beers, that's like a huge win, isn't it?
Well, I think the difference in my approach was I realized that the drink, the drugs, everything was like a painkiller. So where was the pain? So when I started doing that trauma healing, the timeline therapy, releasing these aspects of me that I was holding on to, that shifted. That weight was no longer on my shoulders. The less weight I had on my shoulders, the less desire I had to do these things. And that's when life shifted massively. Like I remember one of the guys that I got a job as a removalist, and I went to Sydney with the boss, and he found out my story, and the next minute he hands me this big pile of drugs, and he's like, "Would you like to start up again?" I basically left there that day, and I never went back. And it was just like everything that I wanted was just handed to me, but it was that old version of me that wanted that still, and that kind of rocked me a little bit. But yeah, it also went to show like how much work.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make light of this, but it seems like you just end up in company with the wrong people. Just like, you get a mentor who's an Italian guy who then's like, all right, I'll teach you how to sell drugs. And then later on down the line, you go and get a job doing something perfectly legal and normal. And like, that's how that loads of people do, and end up almost falling back into that world again. So that's a lot of temptation, isn't it? Being thrown your way. So yeah, that's.
Well, if you look at the law of it, like it is, and that's where the more work that I did on myself, the more my perception changed, the more of the world around me shifted. I was no longer meeting new people with drugs. I was no longer doing those things. Today I'm doing a podcast because what I'm attracting into my life is people that are doing great things within fitness, within life, within their own journeys, and that's who I'm bringing into my life these days. That's the people that I surround myself with, and that's a part of the reason why I'm able to stay clean.
And what happened in terms of, because I know I can't remember which of it might be on your Instagram or on Facebook, I can't remember. It says addiction, chronic pain, personal training, or something like that. And so how did you go from where did the sort of the chronic pain and the injury and that kind of thing, when did that come into your life? Or was that something that you were managing through drink and drugs as well? Or is that kind of like, did you have an injury? Did you have something happen that kind of physically put you in chronic pain?
Yeah, so I was doing I had an injury in 2020. I think it was just an overuse injury. I was doing sales and delivery to truckie offsider, and I think it was just climbing into the truck every day of the week, up to 48 times a day. It took its toll. I think the road was at a different height one day, and I like put my leg up too far and put too much weight on the wrong area, and I ended up with a labral tear in my right hip.
Yeah.
So I went to hospital that night, and I walked out of hospital the next day with severe lower back pain, and my pelvis kept twisting, and just it turned to shit. Like, I ended up needing a walking stick, and couldn't walk, couldn't move, couldn't do anything without severe pain.
Mm.
And that's been a journey, to say the least, to actually overcome that. Harder than addiction, I'll put it that way.
I was going to say, did you ever,
In a
because
way.
you said very honestly that you used alcohol and drugs to mask a pain or to reduce, to make a pain go away. But this was like a traumatic kind of mental, emotional pain. When you had this huge physical pain, where you couldn't walk properly and you had a walking stick and you're in chronic physical pain, were you ever tempted to go back to the kind of alcohol and drugs to manage that pain?
Well, like, I was put on, at one stage I was on MS Contin, so morphines and everything else. So I tried basically everything, and my pain just got worse. And then the doctor pulled me aside one day and he goes, I believe you are one of the cases where painkillers make the pain worse. So that day he stopped the medication, and I stopped taking heavy painkillers. And that was another like a aha moment, that my life had changed massively, because I went from being on heavy opiates to nothing and no withdrawals, no desire to keep using. It was that moment that I fully understood that my addiction must have gone, because you can't be put on that level of drugs if you still have that internal pain and not go back. Or most people can't do that.
Yeah.
I've never heard of anyone. I mean, I'm not in the medical profession or anything like that, but I've never actually heard of people taking painkillers and it making the pain worse. I didn't know that was a thing. Do you think that's
I didn't either.
do you think that's like, no, but in my, like, to make sense of it, I immediately think, well, if you've been an addict in the past and you've been using things to mask pain, basically, then does it take your brain to a place that says this isn't good for me? So the pain gets worse. If there's anybody out there who knows the answer to that, that would be amazing, because that's really interesting, I think. Yeah.
And then how long were you in this kind of state of chronic pain with your hip, with your back, with not being able to walk? And again, I suppose it's a similar question. You were in that the teens and the 20s, and something happened that made you change. What happened? How long were you suffering with chronic pain before you found some kind of way to start improving it? And what was that thing that you found?
So that came as a rude shock as well. So I was on work cover, because it was a work accident. And one day they decided to turn around and say, your accident didn't happen at work, or work wasn't the cause of your accident, which is, like, it is what it is, I guess, now. But they ended up stopping all of my weekly payments. They stopped all of the physio. They stopped all of my treatment. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I've either got to kill myself, because I couldn't handle it. I couldn't handle the pain of my wife having to do everything for me. The trauma that I was doing to my own kids, because I couldn't handle my own emotions and the pain. I'm like, well, I've got to kill myself or help myself. And I found a Cert 3 of fitness course for free in Coffs Harbour, so within a short drive away. And I ended up signing myself onto that. I'm like, well, if no one's going to help me, I'm going to help myself. And that was the start of my fitness journey.
Wow. Okay. So how many years ago? I'm just trying to get, because chronological, kind of to get my head around things. So you're 39 now. How many years ago was it that you decided to do that? When was it you did that course?
So I believe it was somewhere in 2021 that I signed up.
Okay.
So there was about a year of pain and support off the medical professionals and insurance. And then it was about 2021 that I signed up for the Cert 3.
Yeah. So you thought, well, I'm going to take control of this for myself. I'm going to learn more about the body, learn more about movement, learn more about exercise and fitness, and try and find a way that you can take full control yourself. Is that that's an unusual motivation? You don't normally. I've never really heard of that before. Have you, Pete? Where someone does like a training course to kind of basically to help themselves, to fix themselves, rather than as a possible career path, or this was your thought was, I'm going to learn about this to help myself. Yeah.
That was definitely the thought. Is like I love my wife and my kids more than taking a cheap way out. And with addiction, I'd basically done the same thing. I invested in myself and I overcome the problem. So I just assumed that if I invest in myself, I'll overcome this problem. I didn't know how, but I knew there was hope, and I didn't have hope at that time.
Hmm. And how did that work out for you when you enrolled on this course that was fairly nearby to you? I mean, you mentioned obviously when you were listening to people like your Bob Proctor and that kind of thing. Obviously, when you were getting your mind, right and starting to do that, how did it work from a physical point of view when you started enrolling on the course and you started doing things?
Let's just say I skull dragged myself through that certification, and it was one of the hardest things I ever did. I found out more about what I couldn't do than what I could do.
Hmm.
And I had to regress basically everything, which ended up being a blessing in disguise because I learned a lot more than the people that I did the course with.
Hmm.
But it didn't really help. So the guy that was teaching it was an exercise physiologist. I ended up paying him to help align my body, but I couldn't even do the 5 to 7 exercises he gave me without more pain. Which is what led me to research. Like, I'm fascinated with podcasts, and I do a lot of research, and I found Mark Schroesser. I've butchered that name. So one of the original strength guys, Mark Schroep.
That's okay. Is he based in Australia? Is he?
No, so I believe he's in America.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So he ended up having hip issues and a number of issues, and I heard about it on a podcast. I'm like, what did you do? Send him a message. What did you do? How did you overcome your problems? And he told me a little bit about original strength, and I started just copying what I could find online about original strength, and realized that I couldn't do even the 5 resets in one go, but I could spread up the 5 resets over a whole day, and I'd be able to move a lot more than I was moving. It was about the time, like, I had some kettlebells in the garage, and I was doing a lot of research into Strong First and seeing what they are, because in my mind, even just the name Strong First, I'm like, well, I'm going to get strong first, but I'm going to do it in what I can do because I can't do anything else. And I kind of took that to the point where I ended up trap bar deadlifting 315 and bench pressing 180, but I still had a lot of pain and I couldn't do my day-to-day work without pain. So that's when I kind of took a step back. I stopped doing Paul's Bench Master Program, which I signed up for. And I'm like, well, I need to pull back because I'm still in a lot of pain. I still can't do the day-to-day activities without pain. I need to do something different, which is about the time where I signed up to study original strength in Brisbane kettlebells, or Queensland kettlebells, sorry. I did that course there and then started shifting everything. I made that a daily practice. I ended up finding a little bit of Dan John's simple strength and modified that, and just started doing the squat, hinge, push, pull, carry. And through that process, I started to align my body a lot more than what I was doing without guidance. And that made a massive change in my life as well.
Have you ever met Tim Anderson, or have you spoke to Tim Anderson before?
I did a podcast with him, and I've listened to like 100 different podcasts from him, I think.
Yeah, because so he's aware of your story, is he, and the impact that that Original Strength had on you?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Because we had Tim over at my gym a few months. I think it's maybe about May this year. And yeah, he's fantastic guy. Obviously, great guy. You were there, Pete, as well, weren't you?
Yeah. And I met him in 2017 as well.
You met him in 2017. Yeah, but no, that's amazing. And obviously, and Dan John as well. So this is what's incredible. You're in Australia. You're, in the north of Australia, and you listening to podcasts, taking responsibility and ownership, I suppose, of your own recovery, listening to podcasts, reading books, enrolling on courses, and the people that you've come into contact with virtually, not by person, but the impact that's had on you. So okay, so you were getting strong first, as you said, but you were still in pain, and you were doing your resets, and you were working on your original strength. So where did you go from there? I mean, is that just became a daily practice, the original strength, and gradually you felt your movement improved and your pain reduced, or what happened?
Yeah, so I was doing pressing reset up to like 7 times because I wasn't working at this stage. I would just get out in the backyard and roll and crawl and rock and all the other fascinating movements. And I got to the point where I could do enough around the house that I decided my local gym had a job opportunity. And I went there. I said, look, I can't PT. I don't know what I can do. I can do gym inductions. I just want a shot. I want an opportunity. She goes, well, I can't really hire you as a PT, but I can put you on as a lifeguard because we've got a pool as well. And that weekend, I signed up to do the lifeguard qualification, and they've supported me from day one. So I've been there nearly 3 years, and now doing a mixture of lifeguarding and personal training out of that gym. So the more over time, the more I could do, the more I was doing, because I just didn't want to sit at home, and I'd already lost enough. I needed to rebuild in all areas, not just my own body.
And how did you find coaching others and helping others, and just being in that? Because being in a kind of a gym, a lifeguarding, you're in I would think, a very positive kind of space where people are going there to improve themselves and to healthy practices, and active practices. How did you find that kind of environment and going, like you say, all through your life, youngster, teenager, 20s, and then even though you're trying to get away from it, people were trying to claw you back in a little bit, these negative influences. So actually being around sort of a positive people, it sounds like the person who gave you the shot at the gym sounds like they obviously saw something in you or wanted to give you a shot, so how did you find that change of life?
Well, it was that change of life that I needed. Because I wasn't sitting around at home, it started to take a lot of pressure off my lower back. So the more I was doing, the more I was able to do. And that kind of just kicked off there. And in respect to personal training, especially being technically obese, it's been an interesting journey. But those that understand where I was and where I'm at, they gave me a shot, and I've kept my loyals, and I've done a lot of different work with like a good chunk of people. That's still growing nicely. But one of the coolest things that I noticed was if a client says something hurts, I'm able to put myself in that position, and the pain's instantly there. I'm like, yeah, this is what you're doing. You got to brace a little bit better, or you got to breathe, or you've got to just change your body just that little bit. It's been a blessing in disguise, really.
I mean,
it's one of those things that you learn, isn't it? And that I think Fabio mentioned this, and a few other people, but Fabio sticks out in my head. There's some people who just grow up, become strong, train in the gym, get injured here and there, but just get through it, and kind of are just naturally gifted or genetically gifted or talented or whatever. And then, and it's like footballers or whatever, then go, I'll become a coach. and then they can't understand why people just can't do it. Whereas if you've been through all the stuff you've just mentioned, as soon as someone has that sort of problem, you can empathize straight away, and you're like, I know exactly how you feel. And I think that makes people feel more heard. And then, and you've obviously had that in your life, like James was saying with the person who at the gym who said, yeah, you can be alive. Well, we can't give you what you want, but we can give you something, and then you've got what you wanted out of that anyway. So maybe they've had that in their life or something like that. They've seen something, or they're just a nice person, So I think that's great. So how, what's the sort of demographic you train? Do you have a demographic, or do you just train sort of like people who within the gym, or do you do like injury rehab specifically?
So I am working with a lot of NDIS, so a lot of disabilities, whether it's mental or physical. I really enjoy that work because it's a way of giving back. And with the knowledge that I gain through my own pain, it seems to fit really nicely. But then I do also find myself working with a lot of, I would say, over 40s that just want a better balance, more strength, want a better life. So I've really been loving that area as well. And in the process of rebranding and stuff, just really enjoying where I'm at and not pushing anything, just allowing people to come to me. And I don't have that much time available to take on new clients at the moment anyway. So
yeah. This is really, I can't remember the guy's name, Pete, that we had on. I think it was Matt or Matthew, who had the eating disorders when he was growing up. And do you remember
Matt Roberts?
Matt Roberts, that's it.
Yeah.
Had like, kind of bulimia and things like that. And then now does a lot of work with people with eating disorders. And because I think that's the thing, it's the empathy and the having walked that journey yourself. I mean, no, to be honest, very, very few people will have had the journey that you've had, all the things, all the issues that you've overcome throughout your life. But certainly the chronic pain and the overcoming addiction and just getting to movement. It's hugely relatable for people, and hopefully, like obviously sounds to be the case. You're attracting clients and you're working with people, and it's obviously because of the person that you are and the experiences you've had. How have you, just to touch on now, like, because now you are seriously, you are doing sort of performance training yourself now, and you're doing strongman training and strongman competing. And from someone who's gone from, like you say, not physically being able to work because of the amount of pain that you were under, and then just being able to do some maybe original strength spread throughout the day. Like I say, I follow you on social media. We'll make sure other people follow you at the end of the podcast. But you're lifting huge weights now, and are you pain free when you're doing these movements? Are you managing pain, or have you fully rehabbed yourself to the extent that you're now training pain free and getting stronger and stronger?
Well, that's a good question. So previous to Christmas, so in December, I was still only doing like 15-hour weeks at work, between personal training and lifeguarding. That's all I could do without a higher level of pain. And I decided to try the carnivore diet around Christmas time. And within a week, the pain disappeared. I don't know how, other than the fact that it must have a lot of anti-inflammatory benefits, not to mention like the stress I was taking out of fight or flight. So nothing in my environment triggered pain the same way. There's a whole heap of cool stuff there. But I have a mate, Donk, and he got into strongman, and I was like, I could still bench more than he did, that more than he can, and it was just funny how upset that he got when he found out that I was basically a cripple and I could bench 180. And when that pain disappeared, I'm like, well, I want to see, like, he was training strongman. I want to see what I can do. Like, I don't know what I'm capable of. I'm going to find out. And I signed up with a local strongman coach, that lives close by, and he said, I'm not doing any strongman for 3 months. He basically did mobility work, started working out my weaknesses, and then I found a local comp, a novice comp that I wanted to enter, and he goes, okay, I'm happy for you to give it a shot. So he had a few things to practice with, and then I took like a 7-hour drive and bought a whole heap of stuff for myself. And I trained for about a month, went in that comp and came second in the novice comp.
With a month's training. The mobility work in a month's training. That's great.
That's incredible, because I suppose we speak a lot to people here on the podcast who, and I think we've spoke to Tim Anderson about this as well, where if you're in pain, or even if your body's afraid of being in pain, your nervous system just kind of puts the brakes on stuff, doesn't it? And doesn't allow you to do things because it's trying to protect you, and it wants to know it's safe all the time. So it almost sounds like when you came out of pain, you'd almost, you'd taken the handbrake off, and then suddenly you were able to do so much more that you had in reserve and potential. You're able to do all of that.
Yeah.
So the gym that you train at, that I see on social media, the sort of strongman training, I think you were doing it. Were you doing it today, where you were doing like Atlas stones and stuff? Was that earlier today?
Yeah. So at 5:45 I started strongman training at Fender Strength in Coffs Harbour, and we did bench press, Atlas stones tonight. So
yeah, 5:45 this evening. Okay. Yeah.
So I was pretty happy. Like, I'm hitting new PBs nearly every week. So we're doing a strength phase, and like, I've got a foundation of strength with everything that I've done. Now it's just a matter of learning the technique. So as I learn the technique, my PBs are just coming in left, right, and center. So it's a fascinating journey.
Yeah. So that's not the gym. That's not the gym that you work at, though, is it? That's a separate gym that you go to train. Okay. Yeah.
So it was funny with the so I had fear that my hip was going to collapse, because I'd be standing there at work and my hip would just give out a little bit. So I got myself up to 140 kilo squat, and I'm like, I don't know if this is safe. No one's told me. I'm worried that my hip's going to collapse. Then one day I'm like, let's just give it a shot. I put the safeties up. I had a go, made sure that if I was going to fail, it wasn't going to hurt too bad. And then I ended up working up to 2 for 200 from 140 max. And I'm like, well, maybe I can do a hell of a lot more than I've actually been doing. And that's when I started like looking more into strength as a whole as well.
Yeah. Wow. No, it's great to see, because I saw you doing, I think you were doing sets with the 140 kilo stone earlier today, weren't you, over the yoke, I think?
Yeah, so I got five, which is a new PB at 140, and then I got 3 reps for the second set.
Yeah.
And the same thing is what you talked about with Tim. My biceps still playing up from the first competition I did. So as soon as that pain was too much in my bicep, I couldn't do anymore.
Yeah, just leave. Yeah. Brilliant. Oh, it's fantastic. And I saw you mentioned strong first earlier as well. And then I did see that you were doing some swings the other day as well. And someone mentioned something, and you said you might one day do like a strong first or something like that. I saw you maybe someone commented or something. Is that something that maybe you can see on the horizon down in the future?
So my goal was originally, before getting into strongman, before even finding original strength, was to get strong first. I was doing the swings, I was doing Turkish get ups at home, and practicing. Like, I got myself the 1 arm push up, which was pretty good for an obese person at that time. But I think I ended up hurting my wrist, and I couldn't do the get ups, and when my pelvis twisted, I couldn't do swings anymore without creating too much back pump. And when you've already got lower back problems and you get a filthy back pump, that's kind of a disgusting feeling. So that kind of put that on hold. And like, being ADD, I'm like new shiny object. And I kind of got sidetracked with something else. But I would love to do SF1 I paid for a strong first coach to show me how to do the hard
Mm,
style swing.
mm, mm,
It is definitely something that I want. I would love to do Paul McIlroy's
mm.
um, program as well. Like
Yeah.
that's changing people's lives as well. Like there's a lot of stuff that I would love to do. At the moment, I've just sidetracked with strongman and
Well, I
really
think
loving.
you've got another comp coming up in October, have you? Your second competition, I think.
Yeah, so it'll be a 3 lift comp. So max dead, max stone, max log.
Okay. So one rep
So it's
max
a
each of those, yeah?
yeah. So
Yeah.
we're the peak that we've got at Fenrir Strength at the moment stops about a week before that comp. So I'll hit my peak PBs in every lift, and then I'll have a deload week and then go compete. So it kind of works nicely.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. No, that's great. It's well, I have to say that when we started this conversation, I had no idea really what we were going to talk about, and it wasn't what I expected. You know what I mean? Your life story is incredible and is inspiring and is hard hitting, but you've been so open and honest um, with it. It's incredible. So just quickly, how many hours a week are you up to now? You said sort of last year you were kind of sort of 15 hours a week was what you could manage without being in too much pain and stuff. Have you since the pain's gone off? Are you able to manage more work and stuff now?
Yeah, so since that's happened, I'm now doing a head lifeguard role and like 10 hours of PT a week
Mm,
with obviously my own training on top, and that's
mm.
all managed some days without painkillers.
Excellent.
So yeah,
Are you still doing the carnivore diet as well? Or
so I'm conflicted there because um I feel amazing when I have it, but I don't know if it's the best idea to try to put on a little bit of size only eating meat. Like it gets expensive. But then every time I have carbs, my hip pain comes back.
yeah.
So like at the moment, I'm back in that phase of I had about a week back on carbs again, and I'm getting a little bit more lower back pain, and I'm getting a lot of hip pain, and my hip just wants to collapse again. So I
Mm.
kind of feel like I'm stuck on the carnivore diet if I want to be pain free.
But have you tried?
So
Because I mean, just from my experience, and we don't really talk about this that much on here, but I did a year, 100% on it, and felt great.
yeah,
But now I wouldn't say I still am, uh, you know, predominantly I prioritize protein at every meal every day,
yeah,
but I do eat a lot more fruits and vegetables, and I eat rice and stuff like that a lot more now. So I think because it's the ultimate kind of elimination diet, isn't it? So you take
oh for
everything else
sure,
away, and then you realize how good you feel, and then it's possibly just a case of trying to reintroduce things that don't cause that inflammatory response, that don't cause you to get that pain. So but it's not
yeah,
easy, but um and as well I find that being more eating more variety of foods and more volume of foods is better for me for training as well now. Although I thought the
yeah,
experience of doing the full year, it taught me loads. It was great, but now I've kind of reintroduced quite a lot. But
mm,
I've kept a lot of the habits that I got from doing it, like really eating lots and lots of meat and fish and lots of eggs and
yeah,
stuff like that. But no, it's interesting. And I think I've heard that a lot, that people kind of, they do this real strict elimination diet effectively, and then lots of inflammation and pain kind of goes away. But I think
yeah,
probably for the long term, most people have to try and reintroduce a certain amount of stuff back in just for living
yeah.
life. And like you say, I don't know what the prices of food are like in Australia, but living purely on meat and fish and eggs and stuff is quite expensive.
Yeah, well, it's hard to do for less than $20 a day, and when you're raising a family, that like it all adds up. But
Yeah,
I definitely have found that I'm adding different things in, like especially a little bit more carbs around strongman days because I
yeah,
can get away with it a little bit better.
yeah.
Um, it does suck to be losing a lot of weight. Like I we didn't talk about this, but I was 176 kilos at one stage, and I'm back down to 140, about 143.
Mm.
So
So
yeah, it kind of sucks
lost
to be
about
putting.
35 kilos, yeah? Is that
Yeah.
35 kilos? Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, yeah, wow.
So like obviously I feel 10 times better, but to have like 23 kilos of weight loss while on carnivore, and then to go back on carbs and start holding more glycogen and water weight and everything else, it, it makes me question whether it's the right thing. But it like my strength gains show that I'm doing the right thing and I'm not putting on centimeters in the wrong areas. So
Mm.
that's all working nicely at the moment.
No, that's fantastic. And do you mind me asking? I mean, it's kind of personal, but if you don't want to, but you mentioned you're married now. I've seen on your social media you've got you're married with family and everything. How long have you been with your wife for? Is everything settled down and you've been with your wife for a little while now?
Yeah. So what's that? Probably 8 years.
Hmm.
So we've been married for a while. We've got two kids together, and she's got one kid. So who like is basically my daughter. Like I'll love her till the end of time as my daughter. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's a special little relationship, and we continue to grow nicely together. So it's beautiful. She has definitely grounded me in a lot of ways and helped keep me on path in a lot of ways as well. So
Oh, it's lovely.
it's
No,
good.
the reason I ask is I've seen it on social media. I think it's a lovely, and your story, where your life is now, uh, seems. I'm just so happy and so well happy for you, and it's just so lovely that you're in the place you are, having had the life and all the experiences that you've had. So, yeah, thank you so much, Alan, for coming on. I mean, it's 11 o'clock at night now in Australia. What time are you up tomorrow? You up at 5 again tomorrow?
I'll be up at 4 to get into work at 5.
Okay,
But
right, okay. But thank you so
well,
much. I
that's
mean,
all.
yeah, yeah. Pete, have you got anything you want to say before we wrap up?
Yeah, loads. Let's keep it going for another hour or so, and then keep Alan up. Like you don't need sleep. No, I found
I'm
it. What I love is basically Alan's been mentioning loads of people who we've had on the podcast and stuff, but these people are changing people's lives all over the world, aren't they? And we haven't mentioned David Keown either. You've been picking up stones because of you got influenced by him as well, didn't you? From listening to the episode with him on, I think, and you've been out picking
yeah.
up
So
natural stones on beaches and things like that, and it's just the reach of these people. Tim, Dan, John, David, like all these people. This guy Mark, who you mentioned, who will be hopefully getting in touch with if we can work out what his surname is. Well, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. There's like the reach of this thing, of like fitness, health, self improvement, and all that is just just really good. And I feel like you've said yourself, Alan, because I wasn't in this world previously as well, and it's just finding all these people, and once you find them, you keep onto it, you keep hold of it, and you keep getting information from them, and keep asking questions, and keep just keep the ball rolling, because it's changing people's lives around the world, and you're a prime example of that, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. Really, really good. If anyone wants to follow you, because I'm sure, like I say, I follow you and I love seeing all your training and things. What is the best platform? What are you most active on? Is it Facebook or is it Instagram?
Facebook seems to be the one that's yeah, mostly Facebook. Like I'm sharing across to Instagram, but Facebook's the one that's blown up.
Mm.
I haven't been talking about trauma and addiction and stuff lately, but I do share stuff on training, trauma, addiction. I definitely want to start sharing a lot more of it again.
Excellent. So if people just look for your name on Facebook, Allen, Allen Willis, Willis, yeah, on Facebook,
Yes,
they'll be able to find you on
yeah,
there. That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Alan. It's been lovely talking to you, and I'm sure we'll talk again. And we'll keep an eye on you for your next comp in October as well. So, what stone are you going to try and lift for your 1 rep max on the stone? What have you got your eye on?
So it's hard to know. My coach says that 180 is possible, but I haven't lifted a 160 yet to know. But if I just keep greasing the groove and hitting, like I got a lighter stone at home, I was just gonna. He said grease the groove at home with the lighter stone, and then once every few weeks we're doing it in with him. So
yeah,
it's highly possible. I think he said the log's going to be the hardest one because I can strict press up to a certain weight and then it becomes hard. So he's got me working on the push press at the moment. And
yeah,
if I can get that down, he reckons I'll be able to get anywhere from 120 to 140.
yeah.
So
Brilliant. So I think I
with
saw
the
you doing
deadlift,
I saw you do 115 the other recently, didn't I? I think.
I got the 103 with the log at the moment.
Okay.
I've done a military press at 115.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant talking to you. And yeah, we will definitely catch up, and we'll get you on again in the future, I'm sure, down the line. But thank you so much, and thank you so much to everybody for watching, for listening. Please do like, share, subscribe, give Alan a follow. Check out Alan; he's absolutely fantastic. Please do leave a review on Apple Podcasts for us and give us a follow on YouTube if you don't already. Subscribe to us on there. We will be back next week with episode 212 with the Irish physio, Aidan O'Flaherty. Yeah, Pete?
Well done. Well done.
I keep getting his name. Aidan O'Flaherty, the Irish physio. We will be back next week for episode 212. We're going to let Alan go to bed because he's up in 5 hours. And we will see you. We will see you next week. Until then, bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Odyssey.